I'm Jonathan Larsen with TRT Investigates, and we're talking right now about an incident that happened Wednesday night in South Bend, where members of the Black community, including local officials, elected officials, were having a press conference to discuss their experience in a positive way, their experience with Mayor Pete Buttigieg. And the press conference kind of went viral, made a lot of headlines in a lot of the big papers because a member of Black Lives Matter South Bend ended up disrupting the event. And we are talking today with a woman who identifies herself as Yemoja. She is a member of Black Lives Matter in South Bend, and she was there, and she knows the man who was caught on video and is familiar with all the people here. And I wanted to speak to her, to hear her story myself, but also to share it with you. So Yemoja, thank you so much for joining me here at TRT Investigates.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that, Jonathan.
Will you tell me, could you start off with how this event came about and what brought you and Black Lives Matter South Bend to be there at the community center?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. So the media alerted Black Lives Matter concerning the press release. The press release was told to us by said media that it was actually an endorsement for Mayor Pete. So then after we got that information and we had spoke with an elected official who was not in the knowing that she was going to be endorsing Mayor Pete. And so after contacting her, she said that she would not be endorsing Mayor Pete. And we alerted Pete's bots, and we were blocked on every social media site then after. They went on with the press release. We showed up, we had questions, and we wanted answers. And we were silenced, and the man that you see in the video footage was actually in the front of the building while we were strategically placed in the back of the building. We did not want to occupy any of their seats to make it look like there was a bigger turnout than it actually was. Everything that you see on the video was from other members of Black Lives Matter, and Igor was echoing for us because they were trying to silence us. And that's when everything pretty much took shape from what you've seen in the video footage. Igor was never, so in the media, they make it seem as if he ambushed, he was pushing, he was really aggressive. Well, he actually went around everyone and grabbed the mic off the podium, where they articulate in articles and media that he was snatching and pushing, which was the furthest thing from the truth if you look at the video footage. So yeah, he was escorted out by Tyree, which is Eric Logan's brother, but Eric Logan's brother, Tyree, was actually invited by us to kind of secure us, to make sure that nothing happened to us. So,
and if people weren't following the story, Eric Logan, of course, was the 54-year-old Black man who was shot and killed by South Bend police, who say that Logan came at them with a knife, but we don't know exactly what happened because the officer who shot him had not activated his body camera at the time. And of course, this has been a very serious issue, both for South Bend, but also for Buttigieg's presidential campaign. And when the video kind of went viral, a lot of people said, look, even Eric Logan's brother is trying to get that guy out of there, as if Logan was in some way unhappy with what Igor, the protester who was with you, had done. But and I spoke with him, as you know, I spoke with Tyree last night, and he told me that very specifically, as you suggest, he was trying to protect Igor rather than, stop him necessarily from what he was doing, but protect him from the people who were grabbing at him. One woman raised her cane, apparently as if to hit him, according to the video. So just so people know the context there. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so we consider that to be ID, identity of politicking, and we consider that to be a foolish game to play because of the framework that they did. It made it seem as if Igor was being the aggressor. As you can see, they wrestled the uh, microphone out of his hands, and I just want to put on record, this is what democracy looks like. That was a public forum. The public was invited to engage, so that's what we did.
At a public community center,
That's right.
the Charles Martin Youth Center.
Absolutely, yeah. So it was blown out of proportion as if there was something we did wrong, but we were actually exercising our First Amendment, the right to protest.
And we'll get to the issue of Igor specifically, because he was, as you and I have discussed, he was identified in a lot of the immediate coverage as a white man,
Right.
And he is Latino, correct?
Yeah, he's actually Ecuadorian and Colombian. So
Okay.
media projecting him as a white man was very strategic as well.
Or they jumped the gun and just looked at the video and thought that's a white guy, and weren't able to contact him, or didn't think to check, or any number of things could have happened there, I suppose. But I want to back up. Sorry?
Mm-hmm. I think it had everything to do with his Facebook profile picture. After they dug up, his name, they had all across Twitter this picture of a person who was Caucasian but was not Igor.
You had mentioned that earlier. That's right. I apologize. I guess you said he was using that picture as a profile, as a goof, or for whatever reason. And I don't know if I should disclose this, but I actually met Igor when I was in South Bend this past summer. Only knew him enough to have a few drinks with him. But I do want to back up and talk about the press release that originally went out. This was a press release announcing the event. Went out on Pete 2020 stationery, and it said, I'm going to read from it, quote, African American South Bend leaders and elected officials to make special announcement about Pete Buttigieg's support at press conference. And it sounds like what you were saying was that at least one of the people speaking, that would be Karen White of the Common Council, which, if people don't know, that's the legislative branch of South Bend's government. Karen White is a Black woman who's on the council, and the press release, if you're not attuned to the very nuanced use of language there, you hear the word support, that could certainly sound like endorse, when in fact the Buttigieg campaign, I guess, has described it more as, we just wanted to help Black leaders in the community come out and share their positive experiences with Mayor Pete, which of course you're allowed to do, and all of that. But some people, for very obvious reasons, read that as, oh, it's an endorsement. And you're saying that Karen White told you specifically it was not an endorsement. That's right?
Yeah, absolutely. She said she was not at liberty to endorse anyone. She was not asked to endorse. So on Facebook, before we were blocked, the Pete administration was adamant about saying that this was definitely an endorsement by Miss White, who has just won her seat at large. So yeah.
She just won re-election in the elections last month, you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's start off with, I want to get your reaction to some of the things that Pete Buttigieg, Mayor Buttigieg himself, and his campaign said as this story blew up, as it got a lot of media attention. So I'm going to read you a couple quotes here. First from Mayor Buttigieg. This is from an article in The Hill quoting NBC. Buttigieg says, quote, referring to the incident, it shows kind of where politics has come to, especially for somebody to interrupt an African-American woman who is speaking about her truth and in her experience. But this is the climate that we're in, and we need to continue making sure that everyone is empowered to speak their truth, their experience, and in particular, when it comes to South Bend's story. Do you have any response to that from Mayor Buttigieg?
Yeah, I'd actually like to quote Mayor Pete myself by saying, this is exactly what it comes to when we're dealing with politics. When you have elected officials that are impeding on the unjust systems of South Bend, that's very concerning. You know, like, we can't continue to cover up these stories and act as if they're not happening. So that's why we were in position at that press release to make sure that the media realizes that there's two sides to every story, and we've been adamant about sharing what exactly is going on here in South Bend.
And one point, you and I spoke earlier today, and you made a point that I thought was very important, and I almost forgot to bring it up now, but I do want to ask you to reiterate it and flesh it out, which was that, especially if people saw only truncated videos, which includes me, I haven't seen a video of the entire thing out there, but you were suggesting to me earlier that Black Lives Matter, the folks who were there from Black Lives Matter, had been, the plan was to show up, not to be in the seats to suggest that you were there in support, stand in the back, and then at some point you expected to be able to address everyone there. And so it was the idea, in other words, it wasn't that you necessarily came in order to prevent the event from happening, but you suggested to me that it was something very specific that the other councilwoman, Sharon McBride, said, something very specific that I guess maybe the word offended is too strong, but that Black Lives Matter took real issue with. It was a specific substantive reason that prompted sort of the outburst or the vocal objections. Talk about that and tell me what that was.
Yeah, we were all just a bit taken back when Councilwoman McBride stated that this is not gentrification, this is revitalization. When we know that this is displacing families at a large mass amount, we know that.
And when you say this, you're talking about the program where Mayor Buttigieg demolished 1,000 homes in 1,000 days, and they're continuing to take down these homes. Is that right?
Absolutely. And with their efforts, they were supposed to be rebuilding. And now we only have, I think they've built like 4 or 5 houses at this point, and that's ridiculous. It's unheard of, especially when we have such a large population of homeless people in our community. I think it's just ridiculous that we're tearing down these houses, we're displacing communities and families and things of that nature. It's just ridiculous and unheard of.
And you said that when we spoke earlier, you said that the people standing in the back, including Black members of Black Lives Matter, were saying things specifically responding to McBride, and that Igor, the Latino guy who ended up going up to the front, he was amplifying them. Can you share exactly what it was that was being said by the group overall that he wanted to amplify?
Yeah, well, after she was stating that, this is not gentrification, this is revitalization, and we said from the back, this is what gentrification, this is the definition of gentrification. And, Igor just amplified that from the back. He made it very clear that we know exactly what happens when these houses are torn down, that leaves families displaced. And then it feeds into the narrative of exactly what Pete was saying about the school systems, with the children not having role models. Well, could it be possible that you're displacing families? And if it's not the gentrification that's displacing families and leaving them socially and economically bound, then it has to be the mass amount of incarceration for marijuana here in South Bend, Indiana.
I do want to get in a minute to some of the specific issues that you wanted to raise, because the point is not just for people to argue, but the point is for us to discuss what are actually the issues at stake. But before we get there, I want to address the issue of identity politics. And in the press release that you put out, Black Lives Matter South Bend put out, you addressed Igor's ethnicity specifically, because as you and I discussed earlier, there was a lot of attention paid to Igor's ethnicity, the idea that a white man, he was identified as white in some of the coverage. I'm not able to find it at the moment in my pile here, but he was identified as white, and a lot of people took umbrage at the idea that a white man was silencing a black woman. And in that context, I want to read a couple things that you wrote in your press release responding to that, if I may.
Sure.
Black Lives Matter South Bend does not espouse simplistic narratives of what someone must look like to stand up for injustices against Black, brown, and poor people. And then later you say, it is important to note that this man is a person of color. And so I was sort of struck, and I am coming at this from a place of white privilege for sure, but I was struck by the idea that there's a more complicated narrative where it's both important that Igor is a person of color, but you're not espousing narratives that they have to be a person of color to stand up for what you're fighting for. So I wonder, can you expand a little bit on what the more complicated narrative is regarding allies and political identity?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's for simplicity and transparency. This is a fight against good and bad. This is a fight that's been going on since civil rights. We've always had white allies and things of that nature. We do not put people in categories. We don't care if you're rich. We don't care if you're poor. If you're willing to fight with us and stand with us for justice, then we're more than obliged to, have you with us, and I can't stress enough that the time has come now that we get rid of those standards that we've lived by for so many years, that white is right and black is wrong. Ultimately, it's the Blacks, brown people, as well as the poor people that are being victimized by these systems.
So what do you say, and maybe what you just said is what you would say, but what do you say to people, especially other Black people, people of color, who have a problem with the idea of someone who is not Black silencing a Black woman in a space where she had the floor and she had the expectation of being able to express herself? What do you say to them?
I'd have to tell them this is what a democracy looks like. We don't care if they feel that because he's not Black, he can't, speak his mind. Everybody, this is constitutional, has a right to express themselves. It's called freedom of speech. We all are able to express ourselves. But when in a democracy, you have to know that there's going to be times where you're going to have to accept that there's going to be someone that's going to object to what you're saying ultimately.
And just so we're clear, you said to me earlier, I don't remember whether you already said it in this interview, but the point you made earlier was that this was a public space. It was literally a community center.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so it's not as if it was the council meeting where there is sort of an official, this is her time and space.
Yeah. It was a public space. It was in public forum, and we just exercised our constitutional rights of freedom of speech.
And so I want to move on to a slightly different, but obviously related topic, which is the sort of Democratic Party politics around this. And I want to read a tweet that Liz Smith, who I believe is the communications director for the Buttigieg campaign, she tweeted about this, the incident. She said, quote, "It's deeply depressing that Bernie Sanders supporters have gone from harassing Pete Buttigieg's staffers of color online to harassing our supporters of color in real life, but here we are." And I do want to be clear that she was referring specifically to Igor suggesting that the women speaking were not real Black leaders. So that was the context for her remarks. I'm wondering if you care to respond at all to what Liz Smith said about about Bernie Sanders, specifically invoking the idea of Igor in his capacity as someone who I guess supports Bernie Sanders as opposed to being a member of Black Lives Matter. Can you talk about the sort of party politics going on there?
Yeah, so I like to put on the record that Igor has and always been a member of Black Lives Matter, first and foremost. I like to say to Liz that whenever you have leaders, prominent leaders that's supposed to be speaking for the community, that's supposed to advocate for the community, and they're boasting in themselves about gentrification, I mean, it's unheard of that no one can say anything to them. You know, like it has to be. I think the thing about it is South Bend is not used to having any pushback. They've been getting away with murder, literally.
When you say South Bend, you mean the government of South Bend,
yeah,
not the people.
Absolutely. Okay. They haven't had any pushback to deal with. There haven't been any activists that's given them what they put back and putting it back into their faces so that they can see how this looks for transparency. We are a community that is engaged. You know, we hear the voices as Black, as I'm sorry, you got that. Excuse me, but as activists, I'm sorry, we hear the community voices, and if you have a elected official leader, what color they are is benign. Like it makes no difference what color they are. If they're advocating for gentrification, someone needs to say something. Someone needs to stand up, take a stand, and let them know that that is not okay and we are not going to allow it.
And just thank you. And just so people are clear, what role, if any, did the Bernie Sanders campaign or any affiliated organizations have with Black Lives Matter's presence at the event?
Yeah, Jonathan, I mean, the facts are South Bend is very small. The activists here, they need to understand, work together. That's the only way we're going to get anything accomplished, by putting our differences away. Stop pointing out that our differences. What makes us whole? What makes us neutral? What makes us the same? And it's our voices and the oppressed portion of the population, whether they're Bernie Sanders, whether they're Our Revolution, whether they're Food Not Bombs, Black Lives Matter. We work together to get things done.
Well, it's so just so I'm clear, does that mean the Bernie Sanders campaign did have some involvement, or you're just saying that there were people? What are you saying exactly in response to that specifically?
I'm stating that we wear more than one hat here in South Bend. I'm Black Lives Matter. I do community outreach. I engage the community in organizing.
So you're saying there were people who support Bernie there, but it wasn't an official Bernie campaign.
Right. We never got any phone call from Bernie stating we need to go and disturb this community forum. Like, that never happened. We just called on our comrades and they came to help us.
And some of them, as in Igor's case, are Bernie Sanders supporters.
First and foremost, Igor is Black Lives Matter.
Right.
And I assume he might like Bernie as well.
Apparently there was some picture of him with a Bernie sign or something like that, and everyone went, kind of crazy talking about what that meant. I will say, when I hung out with Igor over the summer, Bernie Sanders did not come up to my recollection. We were talking about Black Lives Matters issues. I was there with other Black Lives Matters activists. Unfortunately, I didn't meet you at the time. Since we are on that issue, though, of the organization, if people aren't aware, you're listed as the contact person on on the press release. What is your role within Black Lives Matter South Bend?
My role is the same as everyone else's, to make sure that we're not allowing these unjust situations to continue on in our community.
But
Yeah.
it's not a hierarchical organization where there's a boss or anything like that. You're
No, I know that people would love for it to be that way, but it's not, and it's strategically that way for a reason. So no, there's no leader, there's no hierarchical, there's no president, vice president. We just work together cohesively.
and so clearly the point of the disruption was to draw attention to specific issues. The point of Black Lives Matter South Bend showing up is to draw attention to specific issues. And it got a lot of attention, but I haven't seen a lot of discussion about the specific issues. So can you talk about, let's spend at least a couple of minutes talking about the issues that are motivating you and your organization in your dealings with the city, in terms of what is it you want that you are not getting from the city?
Yeah, so of course, first and foremost, we spoke with Eric Logan's daughter. She actually attended a meeting with us. And first and foremost, our goal is to keep Eric Logan's name relevant. Black Lives Matter would like to hear a guilty verdict against O'Neal regarding the murder of Eric Logan. Secondly, we asked the family.
Let me just bring folks up to speed real quickly. So O'Neal is Sergeant Ryan O'Neal, the officer who killed Eric Logan. Said he was being attacked with a knife. Did not have his body camera on at the time. And one thing we actually just reported recently was that the family's lawyer had told local media there in South Bend that that investigators for the special prosecutor who's looking into this, there is no trial yet, so there's not going to be a verdict per se, but the special prosecutor is looking into this and deciding whether or not to recommend or file charges. And the family's lawyer told me that he was told by the investigators working for the special prosecutor that they thought they would be done by December. However, as I know you know, the state attorney general, in a letter that we obtained, indicated that the investigation itself is expected to go all the way into February, possibly longer. So that's something current out there that I know is of concern to a lot of folks. But I interrupted you, and you were going to move on to the second issue regarding Logan and his family.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. But yeah, we want a guilty verdict first and foremost. Secondly, we want proper bereavement pay for the Logan family for their pain and anguishment. Third, we want a trauma-informed community, which is very important because
Can you explain what that means?
Well, yeah, we're just dealing with so much trauma that's accumulated over years. I think I told you once before about Michael Anderson, who was murdered by the South Bend Police Department due to asphyxiation. Officer Johnson stuffed a straw down Michael Anderson's throat instead of giving him the Heimlich maneuver as he was choking.
I believe they said he had swallowed drugs or something like that, possibly in order to hide evidence or something, I think.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't know, but I do know that it read that the police officer who should know the Heimlich maneuvers, CPR, like those are things that our public figures, our police department should be trained. Yeah, first responders should be trained to know. Him sticking a straw down a man's throat could not have possibly been taught to him anywhere. And the fact that they've just promoted him, it's just ridiculous. It's a sad situation. So yeah, we want a trauma-informed community. And what that looks like is we like to see more pop up maybe mental health facilities in our neighborhoods. We have people that's being brutalized by the police, and they're just going on with their day, and nothing's being done to assess these people. And then they wonder why the crime rate is so high. Well, hurt people. And if they're dealing with trauma and they haven't had the proper tools to deal with their emotions, then yeah, you're going to see that reflect in behavior. So yeah, that's one of our demands. We want a trauma-informed community. Thirdly, we like to see the Board of Public Safety removed ultimately, because we noticed that Chief Ruskowski are promoting officers that have disciplinary write-ups, and it's going before the Board of Public Safety. And they hate it when I say this, but they're rubber stamping everything that comes through the door.
If people don't know, and if people don't know, the Board of Public Safety has a fair amount of oversight over the police department, but they're all appointed by the mayor, Pete Buttigieg.
That's right. And so we are still asking for Chief Ruskowski's resignation. We feel as if that he is completely the reason for the police force being just completely racist. We know for a fact, due to the tapes, that they are looking forward to removing all of the minority police officers and being empowered. They can't wait. I mean, that's what the tapes say. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we like to see Chief Ruskowski demoted and fired. We'd like to see Boykins back as the chief of police if that's something he's interested in.
And now I should say, it's not as though problems of racism began when Scott Ruskowski became chief of police, right?
Yeah, these incidents have been continuous under the Pete administration for 8 years now. Yeah.
And one of the things that was shouted, if not by Igor, then people with Black Lives Matter at the event, was release the tapes. And if people don't know, these are tapes that were secretly made of one officer's line in 2011. And since then, there's primarily been rumors about what's on them. Back in September, we reported that the city has for years had legal documents in its possession that detail very specifically, according to the woman, the former police employee who made these tapes, heard the recordings, she described in some detail what she heard police saying, including, as you mentioned, officers talking about it's going to be a good time when all white officers are in charge, talking about using Buttigieg's donors to get Buttigieg to agree to get rid of Darrell Boykins, the city's first police chief. Why is it? What do those tapes represent to you and the organization that make it so important to have them be released?
Well, I think it paints a picture of the police force. Ultimately, these are the officers that are supposed to protect and serve, and here they are brutalizing and murdering innocent civilians. And I think with those tapes being released, it will paint a spectrum that we already know. Ultimately, it will prove that we haven't just made these allegations up. That there's definitely race soldiers on the police force.
Now, I have been told by people in South Bend that the whatever issues the South Bend police have, they're not endemic to every single officer. I've been told that there are good officers that are trying to do. Okay, please take it away. Go ahead with that.
Yeah. I think we always get a bad rap for exploiting some of the things that's happening in South Bend with the police department. But in fact, we know that it's not the entire police force. So if they know that they're not racist, then they know that we're not talking about them. Ultimately, yeah, just take yourself out of it, but we know ultimately that there are racist police officers in the South Bend Police Department. And if that's not you, if the shoe doesn't fit, don't wear it,
And one narrative I have heard more than once from multiple places is the idea that even the best, most outstanding white cop with all the integrity in the world, if they see something and say something internally, not necessarily under Buttigieg, but possibly under Buttigieg, but also before, they potentially would risk retaliation from their own superiors, white officers who stepped forward. There were, Lieutenant David Newton, no longer with the South Bend Police Force. He brought some allegations to light that even white officers said they were afraid to share because they were concerned about retaliation. So even ones who are inclined to be allies, to report improper rhetoric or other behavior, they've had issues themselves coming forward.
I mean, Officer Hackett is another officer who's filed complaints with the city and was given a hard time. There's countless officers.
That's a black officer named David Hackett, who has actually got a lawsuit that I think is still underway against the city. So just so people know, yeah.
So there are countless officers who relocate to dodge the bullet of the scrutiny of the backlash of the South Bend Police Department.
So I want to make sure that you have a chance to share anything else that you think is important, that you want people to hear if they're listening to this or watching this. So before we go, please, take the floor and let people know what's on your mind and what you want them to know.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. As I said before, we are asking still for the resignation of Chief Ruskowski. We'd like to let Mayor Pete know, even though he's leaving the office, that he's fired, that he has dropped the ball, and he said on the political forum that he couldn't get it done. We know that he didn't want to get it done. Ultimately, we're still asking for the bereavement pay for the Logan family. We will continue to keep his name alive. We are on every social media site. If you'd like to donate, you can find us at Black Lives Matter South Bend on Instagram, Facebook, and it's Black Lives Matter South Bend at gmail.com.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much, Yemoja. As you call yourself as a public face for Black Lives Matter, I appreciate you joining us. And
likewise.
Sorry?
I said likewise.
Oh, well, thank you. And, thanks to everyone watching here at TYT Investigates. If you don't already subscribe to our YouTube channel, I hope you will. And check us out on Facebook as well. We have a live discussion every day at 11:30 a.m. weekdays called TYTI Daily. I hope you can join us for that. In the meantime, take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. Thanks again, Yemoja from Black Lives Matter South Bend.
Thank you.